Russia has launched more than 150 missiles into Ukraine, and special forces are closing in on the capital of Kyiv. Ukraine's president says his troops are in a fierce battle with Russian forces who are attempting to seize control of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. At least 57 people have been killed so far, and that number is obviously expected to rise. U.S. officials say this is only the initial phase of the attack, with Russia holding hundreds of thousands of troops in reserve. Today, President Biden imposed new sanctions against 4 more Russian banks, as well as some prominent Russian citizens. It blocks their access to the U.S. financial system and freezes every asset they have in America.
This includes VTB, the second largest bank in Russia, which has $250 billion in assets. As promised, we're also adding the names to the list of Russian elites and their family members that were sanctioned as well.
Now, the U.S. does not have a mutual defense treaty with Ukraine, and it's not a member of NATO, meaning we have no legal obligation to deploy American troops to protect Ukraine. But there is a significant danger this conflict could spread and engulf U.S. allies in Europe. So let's bring in Congressman Colin Allred, a Democrat representing the 32nd District in Dallas. Thank you, Congressman Allred, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you sit on the House Foreign Relations Committee. Can you give us some insight into the discussions that you're having about how the U.S. can respond?
Well, we clearly need to make sure that Russia suffers some consequences for this premeditated choice of going to war and killing innocent civilians and invading a democratic neighbor. And in this case, we need to isolate them. They should become an international pariah for what they have done. We're going to try to cripple their economy. The sanctions that President Biden announced today, in conjunction with the EU and our NATO allies, and even some of our allies in Asia, like Japan, are going to do that. And we need to support Ukraine in their own ability to defend themselves.
Now, you recently got back from Ukraine and wrote about meeting a woman in Kyiv. What did she say that resonated with you?
Yeah. Well, you know, she told me that she was going to get her white wine and her Kalashnikov, which is with the AK-47 rifle, and defend her country. And this is someone who's an artist, who's not a soldier. And I believed her, and I really think that it's that spirit that is why Russia is not going to succeed in this. They may be able to defeat Ukraine's military, but they won't be able to defeat their people's spirit. And I really believe that. And that's why I think ultimately this is going to be a failure strategically and in the long run for Vladimir Putin.
I want to read, when you got back from that trip, I want to read something that you wrote. You said, Ukraine's fight for their democracy is still ours. Their fight is our fight. That doesn't sound like a man who's going to be satisfied with sanctioning a few rich Russians and, a few banks.
Yeah. Well, what I mean by that is that we're in a global fight for democracy against autocracy. And we have it here at home, too. We saw that on January 6th, and we've seen that with the questioning of our own elections in this country. But around the world, we're seeing autocracies threaten democracies. This is obviously the largest and most recent example. But there's also Taiwan being threatened by China, which I also visited. And I can tell you that this is a global fight that we have to win. We've seen this before. We've seen this story before in the 1930s, and we've seen what happens when we allow despots and dictators to invade democratic neighbors. It doesn't end well, and it doesn't end there, and really importantly. This will not just stop in Ukraine. We're not going to put any U.S. troops on the ground in Ukraine. That's not on the table. But we can help them defend themselves, and we can try to stop Russia from going any further.
President Biden said that Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, yet he decided not to sanction Vladimir Putin, and the sanctions that he has instituted don't touch Russia's oil and gas industry. Does the U.S. risk looking impotent, in the face of this Russian aggression?
No, not at all. These sanctions are unprecedented and they are crippling, and they will stop Russia from pursuing their own national interests. And that's really important. We're stopping the import of vital technologies that's going to really destroy their industrial base. We're going to undercut their strategic ambitions going forward on the world stage. We're going to cripple their ability to bank and their economy. They are going to be hit very hard. The Russian ruble is at its lowest level ever right now. Their market has dropped precipitously. Russia is going to suffer from this, and there can be more applied. But this is certainly not an impotent set of package of sanctions. This is actually the strongest package of sanctions, also in conjunction with our allies, that really has ever been applied to Russia or any country in this kind of a context.
What should people here in North Texas be preparing for in terms of feeling the impact from this conflict?
Well, we don't really know yet. And this is the truth of war, is that you don't know where it's going to go or how long it's going to last or what it's going to touch. But we know that the Russians may try to retaliate with cyber attacks on our own infrastructure here in this country. President Biden has been very clear that if they do that, we will respond. We know that there may be some fluctuations in the markets, both in terms of whether it's raw materials coming out of Russia or anything else, because Russia is a part of the global economy. But what they've done requires a response from us. It requires us, as the leaders of the free world, to stand up for freedom. And this is the way that we can hurt them. As I said, there's not going to be a scenario where American troops are fighting in Ukraine. But what we can do is band together with our allies, with democracies around the world, and say we are not going to allow this to happen without there being severe penalties.
All right, Congressman Colin Allred, I want to thank you for your time and, of course, your insight as well.
Yeah, thanks.
Izzy?